This is the middle of chapter 10 of Rebecca's War. Why didn't Father leave us a boat? She wondered crossly. My goodness, we might want to go fish. Idiot, she cried, disgusted with herself. Stupid, stupid. Father hadn't left them a boat, but Tom had. He kept it beached near a creek near Providence Island. It was just an old flat-bottomed skiff he used for fishing, but it would carry her and the keg. In fact, it was ideal for her purposes. She right out that same afternoon, and after an hour's walk located the spot where Tom hid the little vessel. She tipped it over to drain out the water Tom always filled it with, to keep the seams watertight. Then she changed into boy's clothes, which she had brought along, and rowed up the river to the Willing Wharf, arriving at dusk. She secured the boat fore and aft to the rickety pilings, to make sure it could not be spotted from above, ducked into the tunnel, changed into her own clothes, and went home. The next day it all went like clockwork. She got up early, tiptoed past the sleeping Burkett, and hurried down the stairs to the tunnel. She went automatically to the first of the wine casks from which she had taken the original anchor. But at the last minute she thought better of it. No, that might make it too great a difference in the sound when they were tapped. Instead, she chose a different cask, eased the heavy keg to the ground, and rolled it down to the Delaware, out of her own clothes and into John's. The breeches, which had been too small for Tom, fit her remarkably well, though the skirt was a trifle big and the waistcoat a trifle small. The only hat she could find was one of her grandfather's. It was huge and had a torn crown, and the cuff had long since fallen out. But by pinning up her braid and stuffing a wad of dry grass into the sides, she managed to keep it on. She was glad of the floppy brim because it partially concealed her face, but she wished she had a mirror to see how she looked as a boy. Arrangements made, she hooked the cargo hoist into the keg's sacking, winced it up, cast off the bow of the skiff, and gaffed it into position. Lowering the keg to the bottom of the boat, detached the hook, took her place on a thwart with her legs hiding her cargo, set the oars into the oarlocks, and cast off astern. As the sun came up, she rowed down the Delaware, a raggedy young boy out for a morning's fishing. She had even remembered to bring Tom's rod and line. It was a chilly morning the last week in October, but the sun came up bright from behind New Jersey, and the rowing kept her warm. She had brought some of the cheese and sausage along and paused to nibble from time to time. She passed the old Association battery, now occupied by the Royal Artillery, then several new batteries set up below the city. The British had made this stretch their artillery park. The artillerists had cleared away the underbrush between them and the river's edge, and as she passed, the morning sun flashed off uniform buttons and cap badges and brass muzzles. They were all busy at work already, preparing for their next assault on the downriver fort. Poe was leaving nothing to chance this time, bringing every possible gun to bear. There were some more men encamped just below the second battery. Then came Hell and Hay Creeks, two branches of Hollander's Creek, and beyond them Gloucester Point, where a Jaeger regiment was stationed. The creeks were her best bet, she had decided the day before, and better hay than hell. She maneuvered the skiff into the narrow waters and was pulling strongly, head turned to see where she was going, when a voice spoke from the bank. Out early, my young friend, for what is it that you fish on such a frosty morning? Rebecca jerked spasmodically, tossing an oar of icy water into the bottom of the boat. Then she looked up. She found a Jaeger officer contemplating her benignly. The Jaeger were German sharpshooters, something like the American Rifle Companies, and she took a quick note of that. Though he was an officer, he carried a rifle. What? She said. Oh, well, porgies mostly. Sometimes sea bass come up the river. Ah, so, he said, surprised. They come here, not in the great river himself? He made an expansive gesture, followed by what seemed to Rebecca like a probing examination of herself in the vessel. Could he tell she was a girl? Was he suspicious enough to report her? Or worse, follow her? Yes, they hide in the cove, she said hurriedly. Now I have to go before the sun gets too high. Be careful, young boy, he said. There are here many guns. It is not good that you should be shot at. He brandished his firearm, and she couldn't tell whether there was a threat in the gesture or only kindly warning. He did not try to stop her, however. When she got to the bridge that carried the um, Gloucester Point road, she hurried herself through by the pilings, then rowed off as fast as she could. She was just thankfully rowing the curve in the creek when the same officer appeared on the bridge and stared rather searchingly after her. Suppose he reported, for there was nothing she could do about it. She rowed on. The day before she had selected a spot in which to leave the keg, a nice little hollow, well concealed with sassafras and Virginia creeper. For a landmark she had tied a piece of white rag to one of the sassafrases. She located again now and beached the skiff. Then, the most difficult part of the whole operation, she manhandled the keg with much grunting out of the skiff into its place of concealment. After that she had only to return to the boat to its place of concealment, change back into girl's clothes, and stroll home. 45 guineas she'd asked for this time, the extra 5 for all the trouble they were causing her. Bad news. Chapter 11. Lieutenant Younghusband refused to pay 45 for the brandy, and took such a lofty tone with Rebecca that she began to be afraid that he knew something she didn't. But if they were about to close in on her catch, all the more reason for getting as much as possible for this one. Very well, sir, she told him. I'll have to find someone else who wants it more than you do. You watch your step, young lady, he cautioned her as she marched off. However, by a stroke of luck, she had not gone 10 paces, and was still in full view of the lieutenant when she ran into the officer who had accosted her on the street and offered to top Younghusband's price. She got her 45 guineas, plus the pleasure of seeing the expression on both officers' faces when she gave the purchaser directions for finding the keg. And there is no reason why this scheme can't go on working indefinitely, she told herself smugly. She foresaw a whole month of escorting kegs to Hay Creek, perhaps a whole winter if the Delaware didn't freeze. 2 weeks later the cannonading began. The din was beyond anything Rebecca had ever experienced. General Howe had lined the Delaware with long mortars and 32-pounders, and Admiral Howe had filled the river with 6 ships of the line, 2 frigates, and a sloop of war, and all of this armament was pointing at little Fort Mifflin on Little Mud Island. In between, for the channel between Mud and Providence was only yards wide, were infantry muskets. The firing would open with a roar and a rattle at dawn, and continue all day, slackening off at nightfall to intermittent salvos. Rebecca, who had successfully operated her new system twice more, was stopped from a fourth by an artillery officer with a loaded firelock. Return to the city, he ordered harshly, or I'll sink that boat. This is no place for a lad. As she rowed back upriver, eventually she left the keg in a Kensington field, north of the British lines. She had an excellent view of the bombardment. Many of the shells buried themselves in the soft mud before exploding, and then would erupt in a magnificent column of mud and water, or the mortars would send a charge of grape arching high into the air to patter down a deadly rain behind the palisade. From time to time the Americans fired back, but it was a pitiful performance compared to the concentrated fire of their enemies. Could the Independence Party, she wondered, hope to win this struggle? Dragoon in Albany, the Howes in Philadelphia, Clinton in New York. What else was there for them to take? What had her father said? We don't have to win, Rebecca. All we have to do is keep the British from winning. Couldn't they be said to have won now? After a week of battering, the garrison evacuated Fort Mifflin, which had been pretty well leveled anyway, and slipped across the river to Red Bank. 3 days later Fort Mercer, too, was abandoned as untenable, and the British were free to turn their fire on the state and continental ships still left in the river, which were driven ashore and burned. Then, while the naval contingent concentrated on removing the obstructions from the channel, the army mopped up by firing 11 houses north of the city. because they had been used by American snipers as vantage points from which to fire on the lines. Nearly all were large and handsome country mansions, whose flames could be seen for miles, and ironically most had belonged to staunch loyalists. On November 26th, 30 sail of supply ships and transports reached the city. The British were very triumphant. The fresh supplies brought immediate relief to the beleaguered city. But in the ransom house, meals had already improved considerably ever since Addison started delivering the army rations to Ursula. Rebecca was surprised at how much there was of it. As a captain, the Honourable Frederick was entitled to a triple ration, so many pounds of bread per week, so many pounds of meat, rice, peas, and even butter, so that, even with provisions sadly curtailed, a respectable amount of food was kept flowing into their larder. For, moreover, there were eggs and milk from time to time, for Parkin was only too happy to sell whatever his master did not need. Ursula was sufficiently impressed to give the Honourable Frederick a neutral name. Captain Cargill was der Lumel, the last, but Honourable Frederick was merely der Verwundete, the wounded one. All this did not come quite free, however, for nearly every morning Fitch would appear in the kitchen doorway and delicately clear his throat. "Mr. Frederick's compliments, miss, and did you find that you can spare him an hour this morning?" If she said no, she had spinning to do, or no, she had to hunt for firewood, or no, she had to give Amelia a reading lesson, or just plain no, Fitch would bow and take that answer back to his master, and nothing more would be said. But after a day or two of refusing, Rebecca's conscience would get to work and say things like, "Here you are, literally eating his bread, and you can't even spare the poor pain-racked man an hour's reading." So the next time Fitch made an appearance, she would say yes, all right, and follow him upstairs. However they started out, reading or playing lute, or dictating letters, they always ended up talking, or rather Rebecca talking, and the Honourable Frederick demurely listening and asking the right questions. She talked about her father, about Tom running off, about foraging for food and wood, about Ursula or her brother Claus, now serving with Teufel Pette in Muhlenberg. She related the intimate personal history of every item of furniture in the room. She talked about Philadelphia and ice skating and horse races they used to have on the Common and the Assembly balls, about the Quakers and how so many of them were regarded as Tories because they wouldn't fight, and how, this last September, just before the occupation, 40 or so of them had been banished to Virginia. At least they claimed it was for that reason, she added, but my father says people resent the Quakers so much for being so doughty that they'll take any excuse to get a little revenge. And by doughty, you mean, well, they don't like music, they don't like dancing, they don't like the theater, and they don't approve of higher education. But my father says they don't think much of hunger either, or slavery, or seeing old people or want, so that evens it all out. She had no reason for thinking he was interested in any of this. In his presence she talked, that was all. It frightened her. Sometimes she had the almost irresistible urge to confide in him about the gold. When she got that far, she would make stern resolutions to herself to stay away from him for a day or two. It would be firm. But then she'd yield, and she'd soon be talking again. It puzzled her why she was his choice. Why didn't he call up Lieutenant Younghusband, for instance, and talk about army business, or some other of the subalterns who spent their mornings sitting around the ransom parlor scribbling away at lists and forms and daybooks? He didn't, however. Even when the lieutenant rapped and stuck in his head and said, "I say, sir, I have the present and fit list. Do you care to see it?" The Honourable Frederick would merely answer yes, read the list, hand it back with a comment of some kind, and dismiss the man. In the afternoon and evening, of course, when he became frightened that absurd, was a different matter. At last, one morning, exasperated with herself and him, she asked him, "Why me? You could get anybody. Why always me?" "Because you are a free agent, my dear," he answered promptly. "I don't understand. Fritch and Parkin are in service to me. Burkitt and Addison, the subalterns, are under my command. Peter and Amelia are too young to resist a request from an adult. But you are free to say no if you like. Therefore I enjoy trying to induce you to say yes. It counts points, does it?" He smiled. "In a way, I dare say it does." So she was the object against which he exercised his hobby, which was inveigling. Well, thereafter she lost some of her fear and began to enjoy the game. It had certain rules, she noticed. The Honourable Frederick could not, for example, make an out-and-out pitch for her pity because of his wounded condition, but he could indulge in wistful little references to lonesomeness and boredom. He could not openly bribe or hire her offer her a shilling and say, "Read to him." But he could keep the family in a state of mild and indirect obligation. He could try to find out where the brandy was hidden, pounce on her with unexpected questions, and make deductions from her response. But in return he had to keep her informed of the activities of young husbands' syndicates and other seekers of her catch. He could not threaten, and if he was reduced to begging, that counted against him. On the other hand, once he had gotten her to pay him a visit, he won extra points if he could loosen her tongue, which he nearly always could. For his part, he had to play fair. If she was reading, he had to listen. If she was talking, he had to let her say what she pleased, and once in a while she stumped him. One day, when she was telling about her father's determination to die a rich man, he said with a trace of superiority, "Wealth is of that much importance to him, is it?" "Of course," she came back. "It is to everyone who isn't rich. My father says the only people who are contemptuous of others for wanting to make money are people who already have it." He lost some of his smile. "Oh, come, I don't consider wealth of overwhelming importance, and you couldn't call me rich. My father also says rich people never want to admit they're rich." He was always on the lookout for chinks in Rebecca's armor. When he discovered her weakness for um, march marchpane, he sent Fitch all over Philadelphia and what do we call it? Marchapane. He sent Fitch all over Philadelphia on a hunt for the almond sweetmeat and kept some always on hand. Having taken marzipan, Having taken note that she was proud of the families belonging to the library association, he neatly requested that she keep him in reading matter, and of course she was affected not only by the candy and the flattery, but by the fact that he troubled so on her behalf. Her value to him raised her own value in her own eyes. With the transport came replacements, including a new ensign for the light company, 4th Foot. He was about 18, tall and divinely handsome, with dimples, eyelashes out to here, and a lovely straight back of the neck. Rebecca was smitten, a condition which the Honourable Frederick caught on to about 30 seconds after the ensign Smallwood first put in his head at the door to ask a question. Thereafter she found it was the ensign and not the lieutenant who brought up the present and fit list. But that particular arrangement was short-lived. It was borne in on Rebecca that the new subaltern was causing a good deal of exasperation and short temper in the front parlor. Even the equitable captain, after a long tiresome exchange with Ensign Smallwood, would come close to speaking sharply. And one day, while having something explained to him for what seemed to Rebecca at least the 4th time, the ensign dropped the heavy day-book on the Honourable Frederick's bandaged middle. The protective cage had been discarded the week before, and the captain cried out with pain. "Oh, I say, sir, do forgive me," the ensign spluttered. "I trust it did not cause you undue discomfort." "Cause him discomfort!" cried Lieutenant Young husband, also present. "How could it cause him discomfort, pray? A 4-pound book dropped square on an open wound?" "Oh, I say, I am most frightfully sorry, sir. Do let me rub the spot, sir. That will surely help." Rebecca felt her partiality ebbing away rather quickly. In the course of the Honourable Frederick's fending off his subordinate, his eyes met hers, and she found suddenly that they shared an opinion. Divinely handsome, perhaps, but dumb, 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 dumb. Thereafter it was again the lieutenant who brought up the list, and the Honourable Frederick had to look for new chinks to be used in inveigling Rebecca to visit him. Throughout December the news seemed to get worse and worse. Deserters, mostly Irishmen, streamed into the city from the American army and were recruited by the British, who were trying to beef up their ranks and weren't having much luck getting the loyalists to enlist. Washington hovered about near White Marsh, 16 miles from the city, and in early December Hal marched out to meet him. They sat and glared at one another across Chestnut Hill. Then Hal marched back to Philadelphia again, and that was that. A week later Cornwallis marched out on a foraging expedition in force, and returned laden with provisions. Meanwhile the Tory Queen's Rangers raided up the Frankfort road, driving away American patrols and making it safe for the farmers to bring their produce to town. And one morning, just as Rebecca was thinking of making a fifth trip downriver before the ice season was on them, her newfound route for removing brandy fell to pieces. The Ransomes were seated at the kitchen table eating Captain Towns' rations when they heard a distant sound. It came closer and closer, taking on an odd, eerie quality. Ursula cocked her head. "What is it?" It resolved itself into men's voices, somehow rendered hollow. Then there was a bang and a clatter, and the trap door in the laundry room was flung open, and half a dozen subalterns came piling up the ladder into the house. They had rumbled the tunnel. "Good morning, madam," they said, laughing with great humor, and bowed most elaborately to Rebecca and Ursula. "Could you direct us to the street entrance?" Christmas treat. Ursula, chapter 12. Ursula leaped to her feet, pointing to the outside door. "For dirty Englishers the back way is good enough." But they located the inside stairs without trouble, and with more mocking bows they departed to share their triumph with their invalid comrade. Rebecca turned on Peter and Amelia, for even the little ones knew about the tunnel. "Did you tell them, Amelia?" she demanded. "Peter, did you let them know about the tunnel?" "No," they insisted, wide-eyed. "What about the Honourable Frederick? Did you tell him?" Several weeks earlier, at his request, she had taken them to the sick room and introduced him, and occasionally since they had wandered into chat. "No," they said, we didn't. "Then how did they find out? Ursula, did you?" Me, Miss Becky? "I do not with them speak even." "Then who?" The tunnel was all but invisible from the wharf, and even when the secret of it was first made known, it was by betrayal. When the officers had returned to their quills and their presents and fit lists in the parlor, Rebecca presented herself at the sick room. Seeing who it was, Fitch threw it wide. "Now, it's no good glaring at me," the Honourable Frederick said immediately, shielding his face with his hand. "Mr. Willing is the one who told them." "Mr. Willing!" she echoed, stopped dead in her tracks. "Yes, the other evening some of those senior officers dined with a gentleman, and as an amusing story they related the various discomfitures of the subalterns in their efforts to locate your brandy. He laughed very heartily, did Mr. Willing, especially at the notion of the convalescents keeping watch on the front door. But when he had had his laugh, he told them about the tunnel, and the news ultimately filtered its way down to young husband. Really, it was too much, Rebecca thought. Wasn't she having enough trouble trying to sidestep the king's entire forces without personal friends helping her opponents? Having let the cat out, he seemed remorseful, I'm told, the Honourable Frederick went on, in that disconcerting way he had of reading her mind. But I gather the port had been circulating freely, and he wasn't thinking as clearly as usual. I'm sorry about it, my dear. Sympathy and all that. Thank goodness the secret of the wine cask was not known outside the family. So, for the moment the brandy was still safe, but how much longer? That worries me, Rebecca confessed. What worries me, Rebecca confessed, is the civilian authorities finding out. I mean, if everybody is talking so freely, surely the word is going to reach Mr. Galloway's ear any day now. Not necessarily. There is no love lost between Hal and Galloway, you know, and most officers think it rather a good joke on the civilian side that these very fine spirits should exist right under his nose. None of our people will volunteer information. Perhaps not, Rebecca said, unconvinced. But what if all this joking is overheard in a tavern? If only she could get it all out, bury it in a field somewhere, or pay a farmer to keep it in his barn. I suppose they'll be watching the tunnel entrance now. They planned to, he admitted. There was even some talk of searching the house. A thrill of horror went through Rebecca. No, they can't search. She froze hand to her mouth and gazed at him with stricken eyes. It's actually in the house, then, he said, her tongue, her wayward tongue. She was going to blurt out her real secret one of these days. What was best to answer? If she said yes, that would be it, a search inside and out. If she said no, after hinting that she meant yes, they would all the more suspicious that the catch was indoors. Rebecca, I'm neutral, the Honourable Frederick said. He no longer needed his knees propped up, and could lie with pillows behind his head, arms thrust into those sleeves of a figured silk dressing gown. My digestive tract will be in no condition to manage brandy for any number of months. I have no cause to help the others. Fitch, charge glasses. He accepted a cup of milk and sipped it like a wine connoisseur. Ah, 77, that was a good year for milk. Then lifting it in a salute, confusion to their quest. There was no reason to trust him, but she had to do what she could to repair her ghastly blunder. It's not in the house itself, sir, but it's nearby, a hiding hole of my grandfather's. She began rather shakily and hastily to talk about her grandfather, his early years before the mast with Teddy, the stake he had made pirateering in King George's War and later in the French War. It wasn't considered piracy then, she tossed in tartly. Building this house was the profit, smuggling tea and silk and rum. The Honourable Frederick was, as always, hanging on her every word, and gradually she relaxed and got more and more chatty. He reasoned that, while he was at it, he might as well build a few little devices into the premises to help out with the smuggling, like the tunnel. Yes, the tunnel and the other things. We own all the land between here and the river, so it wasn't as if it were trespassing. Good lack, that would be awkward, being trespassed on by a tunnel. There used to be a secret exit from the tunnel that emerged in the garden. Grandpa and Teddy once escaped through it with a whole hogshead of sugar, with the preventives right on their tail. But Mother had it blocked up and used the spot for her cabbage roses. Do go on, he said, and she fell silent. He was all agog, head cocked, green eyes bright and wide, fixed on her avidly, lips slightly parted, the intelligent little boy eager to learn. He's drawing me out again, she thought. This has got to stop. She rose. I have to go, sir. I'm way behind on my spinning. We'll have no linen for shirts and breeches when it's time to take Peter out of petticoats. Oh, stay and talk, do, he urged with the light-hearted assurance of someone with 6 drawers full of shirts and breeches. She shook her head. But thank you for telling me about Mr. Willing. As she took her place at the wheel beside the kitchen fire, she put her mind to the problem of the brandy. If young husband and the cronies watched the tunnel, she might as well resign herself ultimately to revealing the secret of its hiding place. But she wasn't ready to give in quite yet. If only she could think of some way to get it clear out of the city, to a secret place where no one would think of looking beyond the lines by preference, where even the officers did not go out without escort. But that was mere wishful thinking. Even if she could get it off the premises without being seen, how could she possibly slip it through the lines? And if she were caught in the attempt, they would take that as all the excuse they needed to confiscate the lot. And as December advanced, she got no closer to thinking up a solution than that. It was turning out to be a mild winter, too, and if they hadn't discovered the tunnel, she might have gone on till spring, rowing kegs about. Drat Mr. Willing, anyway. Meanwhile, Mr. Galloway tightened his iron grip on the city, and laws and regulations, ordinances came flying from his pen. It was forbidden to appear on the street at night without a lantern. Wood could not be cut except for the use of the troops. Citizens were required to sweep the street in front of their premises every Saturday afternoon. There was a fine for an unswept chimney. Taverns had to have special licenses. The market was strictly regulated as to hours and prices. A permit was needed to sell a blanket. Many citizens whose trade had been ruined by the occupation were selling their belongings for food. Nevertheless, there was a shortage of blankets in the city, and even the British had to issue a public request for 600 contributions. When the garret became absolutely unbearable without well coverings, Rebecca had to hunt for 2 full days and pay over 5 full guineas for an illicit quilt. But food was in better supply than it had been. With the river open and the wharfs were jammed, gunwale to gunwale the ships lay, almost from Vine to South, their masts and spars forming a perfect lacework against the December sky. Unpatriotic or not, it did Rebecca's heart good to see them. She did like a wharf to be busy. The whole city was slowly coming back to life. Shops threw up their shutters. The market sheds along Market Street began to stir. It was nothing like the crowded, bustling market of preoccupation days, but an improvement over the tense September and grim October, more and more farmers made it safely to the city with their produce. Laid apples, strings of corn, sausages, jugs of cider, and Monongahela rye, onions, potatoes, flax, walnuts, and hickory firewood. Even a few of the great six-horse Conestoga wagons rumbled through the city, their bells jingling cheerfully, and were hired out to the British commissary for 20 shillings a day. Prices were so high that Rebecca's guineas slipped through her fingers like water. What was she going to do when they were all gone? The Honourable Frederick called her in one day and asked to buy a anchor on behalf of his regiment, which wanted to present it to General Howe for Christmas, and she had to be evasive. The officers were still having the tunnel watched, and she had gone so long without selling them a keg that they were growing convinced that the catch was either in the house or in the tunnel. Any day now, if she didn't think of a way to get around the problem, they were going to start a really thorough search. Still, the only thing that occurred to her was a maxim of her grandfather's: bribery won't always work, the old rogue used to say, but it's always worth trying. But if she bribed the sentry, she would be putting herself in his hands. He might be tempted to blackmail her later. Anyway, any soldier who would take a bribe from her to betray his officers would take one from his officers to betray her. Now she had to think of some way around them. Just before Christmas, British troops reported that the Americans had abandoned their lines at Whitemarsh and retreated farther up the Schuylkill to a defensive position in the hills. That night, a depressed and anxious Rebecca listened shamelessly at the chimney as the subalterns brought the news to their friend. "And there the man sits," said young husband's voice with disdain, "his men naked and starving and diseased, abandoning him by the thousands. In another month we'll be able to sweep him up with a corporal's guard." "Good job, too," growled Ensign Smallwood. "It's time we put an end to this business and returned these people to their allegiance." They huffed away a little longer. Then Rebecca heard the Honourable Frederick ask, "What's the name of this place again?" "Valley Fort." No, old man, Forge. Valley Forge. It's about 20 miles from here by road. About 25 if you follow the river. "That's not much of a retreat, I shouldn't think," the Honourable Frederick said dubiously. "Surely he's in an excellent position to harass us from there. Hound foraging parties and the like. Not in his condition, Prince. The man is spent, I tell you. I dare say the rebels will be suing for submission any day now." The words were still ringing in Rebecca's ears the next morning as she set out for the shambles. Surely now the cause was well and truly lost. And tomorrow was Christmas. Well, she thought stoutly, at least we can have a good dinner for the holiday with meat and all, perhaps even a turkey or a good cut of beef. The shambles, where the butchers did their slaughtering and farmers brought carcasses of meat to sell, lay in the middle of Market Street between Front and Second. The town whipping post was just in front of it at Second and Market, the heart of Philadelphia. Saturday morning between 10 and 11 had always been public whipping time, and you could have your servant punished there if you wanted by sending him to the public executioner with a note. Across the street rose the old courthouse with its double staircase running around the three sides of the building and terminating in a little balcony. The city did its voting on that balcony, and in the past there had been political episodes in which two opposing parties had struggled for physical possession of the steps. Behind the courthouse, running up the center of Market to Third, stretched the roofed stalls for produce, now once more being occupied with trade. Rebecca looked over the meat on view, hung from great hooks. Her spirits lifted. How marvelous to see whole carcasses again, even if there were only a few. To watch the butchers cut out a whole ham with a few slashes of their big knives. She hovered, tempted, before a particularly juicy-looking piece of meat. "How much for this?" she asked the farmer who was operating the stall. He frowned at her and shook her head ever so slightly. "Try that," he said, low, pointing with his thumb to a piece 2 hooks down. She compared the two pieces, puzzled. "What's wrong with this one?" Yesterday a Tory dragoon was riding it. While she was trying to digest that, he sidled closer and put his lips to her ear. "Your name is Rebecca Ransom?" She stared. "Yes, but how?" "One of my men has been watching your house all day. He followed you here. If you hadn't come, we'd have gone to you. Have you ever seen anything like this before?" In the palm of his hand he cupped so that only she could see it, was the brass button in sight WR, the Delaware Dragoon. The farmer, now that Rebecca took a close look, shocked look, had an intelligent and good-humored face. He was about 30, muscular, well set up under his worn countryman's garb. He grinned slightly at her confusion, then took up a position that shielded her from the eyes of passers-by while she hauled out her button and displayed it. "Right," he said briskly. "I'm McLean, captain. Rodney, Delaware Light Dragoons. I've come about your father's cargo." Her father, yes. This meant he was safe, or anyway had reached some port in safety. Now if only Tom, she could think about that later. Dragoons, she echoed. Then when you said, I mean, about the meat, you meant it? Certainly. We have to have some excuse to get into the city to look around, and there's no better one than selling the Tories back their own horse flesh. While she was speaking, he nonchalantly lifted down the side of beef he had recommended, and began dropping two knives together. This isn't much better, I'm afraid. A tough little beast led us a merry chase, but at least she's worn horns. How about a bit of brisket? I guess so. Hacking away with more zeal than skill, he said in that same low tone, "How now about that gold?" "Oh yes, please come and take it away," she said in a rush. She was conscious of an enormous feeling of relief and lightness that the moment had actually come when she could get rid of her burdensome secret treasure, when an authoritative adult was there to take charge. "I've come so close so many times to letting out the secret I just can't seem to help myself, so if you'll just get it out of here somehow." He glanced up from his work. "Somehow. That's the key word. I understand you have officers in the house." "Yes," she said and faltered, because of course the same difficulties had prevented her from getting the brandy out unseen also stood in the way of removing the gold. There was a sentry at one end of the exit route, and a house full of King's officers at the other. "And that's not all," she added unhappily. "They've found out about the tunnel and have a sentry watching it night and day." "What? How did that happen?" "Well, it's the brandy, you see." As she explained, the whole thing seemed progressively more ridiculous. The captain's expression grew puzzled. "I don't understand. You mean to say the syndicate, this group of officers, they have gone to all this trouble merely in an attempt to find a catch of spirits?" "Yes, of course, it's the best brandy. Besides, they don't have very much to do, and I think they've made a kind of game of it to amuse themselves. They scold a lot and get up on their high horse. Very hoity-toity, but they could just smash it and grab it if they really wanted to." "What I'm afraid of is that word of it will get to the civilian government and old Galloway will order it seized, and you know what they're going to find if they really search." "Yes, that is bad. But you see, Rebecca, there is an additional difficulty." If there was one thing they didn't need, it was the different additional difficulties. "What's that?" "Well, at the time the gold went into the house, there was no shipping in the river and no problem of arriving and departing without being seen. But now," he nodded toward the wharfs a block away, where the ships were moored so close together you could scarcely see the Delaware. "So the sentry doesn't matter anyway because you can't come by water." "Right. We'll have to employ a cart or sledge or some kind and pile up straw on top. It's going to take a lot of coming and going to haul all that out of there. So we have to pick a time when it's dark and the soldiers are also out of the house. Do they have a regular duty schedule that you... Why, what's the matter?" "The Honourable Frederick. I forgot." As Fitch predicted, Captain Towns's recovery had been slow. He was to be allowed to sit in a chair for Christmas, and to have a visit from General Howe himself by way of celebration, but except for that he was still bedfast. As she described the situation, the dragoon's face grew long. "That settles it, then. We might be able to overpower one or two men, without anyone outside the house knowing anything about it, but this mob you seem to have about at all times. No, we can't chance it." "But the gold can't stay there forever, Captain," she protested in dismay. "No, but make haste slowly, you know. I don't want to move until your lodger is up and about and resumes his duties. Better yet, Not until the spring campaign is underway and the city is emptier of troops. Spring? I can't possibly. You'll have to, I'm afraid. You've done so well so far, Rebecca. Just keep it up a little longer. Her burden settled back down on her shoulders, feeling heavier than ever. But she thought about General Washington, the conditions of the troops, and told herself that she had small grounds for complaint. All right, she said reluctantly, but wait a minute, I forgot. That brandy, if I don't produce another keg soon, they're going to know it's in the house and tear the place apart. If it comes to that, you can reveal the brandy's hiding place. Better to lose it than the other. But they're not stupid. At least Honourable Frederick isn't. Drat him. They're going to ask themselves, why, after all my trouble, am I suddenly giving in? Yes, you have a point. He had managed to remove a chunk of meat from the cow's breast. He weighed it roughly in his hand. About 8 pounds, I guess. They're getting 1 and 6 a pound for this nowadays. I have to charge, although it gets suspicious. I understand. I have money. He whistled as she counted the yellow coins into his hand. Brandy money. We're getting low on these, she said ruefully. I don't know what we'll do when we run out. He snapped his fingers. By jingoes! If I can't take the gold off your hands, at least it can help you smuggle the brandy out of the house. All we have to think of is a way to getting it through the British lines. Well, perhaps. Oh. Across the street, a young officer of the Bucks County Light Dragoon, a loyalist outfit, had been watching them. Now he pushed off the wall and crossed over towards them. I've seen you before, he said to Captain McLean. Indeed you have, the latter replied wrathfully. Drove off my best road sow and stole 3 bushels of corn for the high and mighty robbers you call troops, and presented me with a receipt that the quartermaster refuses to honor. Says the goods were taken by force, and therefore I'll have to wait till the end of the rebellion to redeem the draft, and serve you right for withholding supplies from His Majesty's forces. The Tory replied, but his suspicions, if that's what they were mollified, and he strode off. Rebecca had trouble getting her breath back. I thought we were done for. It was a trifle close, the Delaware man admitted. We've stood talking too long. Look, tomorrow's Christmas. There's sure to be carousing. A carouse is always the best time for doing something on the sly. I don't know just how we'll go about rescuing the brandy, but I'll think of something. I'll come to the house after dark. All right, but be careful. The Honourable Frederick is going to be stone cold sober. I'll take precautions. Here's your meat. Sorry I have no cabbage leaves to wrap it in. Rebecca laid the chunk of brisket away in her market basket, then surveyed it guiltily. It seems piggish to be having a feast when things are such a bad way for General Washington. Is it true that the troops are all deserting? Desertion is commonplace, he said, but it is always in winter. Provisions are scanty too, and the men are very inadequately clothed. But morale is high, and they'll never all desert. I don't see how morale could possibly be high with bad news everywhere. Dragoon in Albany, Howe here, the fort's fallen, half of Jersey under their control, General Washington in such a bad way. During this recital of woe, Captain McLean's jaw had been slowly dropping. You mean you haven't heard yet? Heard what? About Dragoon. The British have heard. They must be keeping it mighty quiet. What about it? My dear young lady, far from being in Albany, General Dragoon is in Boston, a prisoner with all his men. What? Yes, indeed. The western wing of the invasion was stopped by the New York militia at Fort Stanwix. A Hessian foraging in force was surrounded at Bennington by the New Hampshire militia and pretty near wiped out, and the main body capitulated to Gates and Arnold at a place on the upper Hudson called Saratoga. Saratoga, she echoed. But this was the best of all possible news. When did this happen? Last October, yep. Gentleman Johnny is out of the picture. Imagine that, a whole British army surrendered. I'm not sure, he added on a note of awe, but I don't think it's ever happened before, not a whole army. The French will be signing an allegiance with us now, for sure and for certain sure. Just see how it's done. So it was a happy holiday after all. Ursula received both news and beef with cries of ecstatic German. We have potatoes and a little flour. Now, Miss Becky, you buy from the Englishers' groom 3 eggs, and we'll make Bulba Shenko. Hooray! Shouted the three ramblers in unison, for pot roast with potato dumpling was one of their favorites. As Captain McLean had predicted, Christmas meant carousing. Rebecca making a late afternoon tour of the waterfront in search for candles, saw it starting up already. The crooked billet was filled with blue-coated Hessians, singing a melodious old songs in German. They had sung and drunk a year ago at Trenton, it was said, and were well hung up by the 26th when Washington fell on them out of the blue. You'd think they'd learn. At the old London coffee house and the city tavern, the officers were gathered in scarlet clusters, and through the lighted windows Rebecca could see the tapmen moving from one to another with tankards and long clay pipes. The civilian population seemed less eager to celebrate. Most years the Philadelphia Germans would be setting up their Yule trees, decorating prettily with lighted candles and special cookies and little decorations in colored straw. But Rebecca saw few of them this year. By sundown the streets were deserted except for soldiers, and Rebecca was glad to hurry into the house and down to the warm kitchen. An invitation was awaiting her. "Mr. Frederick's compliments, miss," said Fitch from the doorway, "and would it be your wish to join him in his quarters tomorrow to be introduced to Sir William Howe?" "Me? And the children, I am instructed to add." It had taken her entirely by surprise, for as a rule the Honourable Frederick kept the army part of his life separate from his relations with the family. "Well, now, I don't know," she answered slowly. Inwardly she debated the problem. Patriotic fervour struggled with curiosity. She heard nothing but Howe for the past 3 years, and now at a close-up view was offered. "Oh, well, yes, I guess. I think I'd like that. Thank the captain for me." "Very good, miss. The general is expected at approximately 2 p.m." Ursula did not approve, and would have no part in the frantic scramble to wash a fresh petticoat for Peter, and fresh white caps and aprons for Rebecca and Amelia, to hunt out some ribbons with which to prink up their tired old everyday garments, to polish shoes with lard, and rub up the buckles to a state that would pass muster with a general. As she labored with flat iron and runching iron, Rebecca read the younger ones a lecture. Amelia was not to ask Sir William what the "sir" meant. In fact, it was not to ask questions at all. Peter was not to squirm, not to cry, not to bury his face in her Rebecca's dress. Peter was to shake the general's hand, bow like a gentleman, and girls were to curtsy. Was that clear? "Huh!" Ursula snorted. "For this great road we must curtsy once." But everything was ready in time, and when the